Hello. Welcome to the late afternoon, and I thought I might have a rather jolly tea, and I couldn't find anything else to have, so I'm going to have a croissant. Sorry, apologies. I'm sort of turning the day upside down, as is Nadhim Zahawi. Now, Nadhim Zahawi is I was going to say vacations minister. He's not anything but. He's the vaccines minister. And he was complaining this morning on the last day of the parliamentary session. When an MP accused Boris of being a liar, and you're not allowed to say that somebody's a liar in Parliament. So she was made to think about it. And when she thought about it, she said, absolutely, he's a liar. And then she was made to leave Parliament for until the end of the session, which means basically until September, until they all come trooping back. Now, Zahawi pointed out that a lot of younger people, that is people aged 18 to 29, 34% I think, have not had their first vaccine. So we need more younger people to have their vaccines. And he has threatened a passport. In fact, he's done more than threaten it. He's pretty well made it inevitable, which is a little bit worrying. What this means is that we are now pretty well set to have an ID card. Now, I think I'm right in saying that nearly all European countries, or most countries in fact, have an ID card. This is a card that contains all your relevant information on a little chip, your social information, your medical information, your name, and so on. There are arguments for and against, and in fact the last Labour Party was very keen on the idea of an ID card, and it was Mrs May who stamped on this and said no when the Conservatives came back into power. Now, if we had had an ID card, then I presume there would have been no Windrush scandal. And people who propose the ID card say that it would also help us to monitor immigration, because we have very little idea about who has come into this country and in fact who leaves this country. It might help to combat trafficking, which would be great. But actually there is little evidence from other countries that the ID card acts as a real deterrent to those who are determined to get in under the system. We already have demands to show a national insurance number and demands to pay a minimum wage to people. So if you can get round those, then you can get round the need for an ID card. Theresa May, to go back to Theresa May, who said in 2000, and I'm smiling because I do find Theresa May as, in any situation, faintly amusing, except when she was Prime Minister and actually had real power and did nothing with it, really. Give her a field of corn, Theresa May will be jolly and entertaining. Give her a field of corn and a caravan. I'm sure Theresa May will be very happy. Happy as Larry. But she said in 2010 that scrapping the ID card plans would reduce the control of the state over law-abiding people and hand back power to the people. Seems perfectly reasonable. Jacob Rees-Mogg was involved in this sort of in this sort of U-turn and this rejection of the Labour ID card scheme. He said that ID cards would change our fundamental relationship with the state. And at the moment we have a right to walk down the street, and nobody has a right to interfere with us and ask us what our business is. We do not need, and we cannot be challenged just for walking down the street. But if we had an ID card, Jacob Rees-Mogg was saying, we could be challenged by the police on the street. And this sort of challenge would surely single out minorities. Now, just to put this into context, in the early 2000s, I was in Greece when Greece decided to remove religion from the ID cards. And a huge fuss was made by the then Archbishop of Athens, a man called Christodoulos. Christodoulos and I clashed on one or two occasions, yeah, I found him a difficult, testy man. And on this particular occasion, he thought that removing religion from the ID cards would remove the idea that if you are Greek, you are Orthodox. If you are Orthodox, you are Greek, which is something I didn't agree anyway. The Greek ID card is really a Greek police identification card. Δελτίο αστυνομικής ταυτότητας. And it was introduced into Greece by the dictator, the one that we don't know very much about in the rest of the world, who took over Greece just before the Second World War. His name was Metαξάς. And as a result of that ID card and the fact that people had to identify themselves by religion, the Jewish population, the very large Jewish population, particularly in Corfu, in Crete, and in Thessaloniki, were immediately identified and shipped off to concentration camps. It was a very simple matter to identify people who were Jewish because it was on their ID card. And I'm always mindful of this fact when the ID card debate comes up, that an ID card may help to clarify matters, but it also helps to identify who was Jewish and to send people off in very large numbers to the gas chambers in the concentration camps. So when the Liberal MP, Alistair Campbell, I think it was, asked a direct question this morning, will you introduce COVID passports? Nadhim, Zahawi, prevaricated at first, but eventually seems to have whittled it down. What again we've got from this government is ambiguity. What Zahawi actually said was that large unstructured gatherings may well need COVID passports by mid to late September. But in the meantime, he was encouraging the use of the NHS COVID pass, which is what he's suggesting will be the basic COVID passport anyway. So I don't quite see what the difference is. So I suspect we have to wait on the detail, and I suspect there's going to be another thumping surprise and possibly another U-turn before we get to the middle of September. Who knows where we're going? Certainly not the people who are in charge, or supposedly in charge. You know, I have never before looked at a government and despaired, and I do at the moment. There we are, so do the birds. We have a friendly pigeon. Have fun. Do subscribe and do ring the bell. Thank you.